This episode is brought to you by Innova Fertility and Reproductive Health. Located in Toronto, Ontario, Innova is the first next-generation IVF center in Canada. For more information, head over to innovafertility.com. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 156. Welcome to the 156th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm excited to share today's interview with you because today we're talking all about menstrual cups. I know a lot of you use menstrual cups, and I've spoken about on the podcast many times about how for the majority of my menstruating life, I've actually used menstrual cups as well. And so today I'm interviewing the founder of Lunette. So it's pretty exciting and pretty fun because we really get into a lot of important topics about menstruation and access to menstrual products. And you know, if you've listened to the show for a while, that I am definitely passionate about those things. So I'm really excited to share today's episode with you. If you're listening to this episode in real time, at the time this is airing, I have just had my first two sessions with my two amazing groups of the Fertility Awareness Mastery program. That's my 10-week group program where we really delve into fertility awareness charting. And I absolutely adore the women in the group. So if you're listening, yes, I'm talking about you. I love the way the groups come together and the women that I always say I attract the sweetest and nicest women to me. And so there's a few things that I love about the groups. One of the things is that it really gives us the time that we need to go through and delve into the charting. For the first couple of sessions, we're always really focused on the charting aspects of things, getting down the method, understanding mucus charting, all the questions about basal body temperature taking and cervical position checking. But quite quickly, I find that once you really get the basics down, my clients, my group participants, over a couple of weeks, they really start to gain that confidence. So they start to gain that confidence quite quickly. And so what happens after the first couple of sessions is that we start delving into the charting aspect of it and really getting a sense of how your health is reflected into your menstrual cycle charts. And one of the great things about this program, there's really no other program like it that goes into this level of depth in such a short period of time and has as many group sessions as the one that I'm offering. And so I'm really proud of the program. I really love the results that come out of it. And all of the women who are part of the program, they always come out saying how much more confident they feel about charting their cycles and how much they've learned. So I just wanted to share that with you because I'm kind of coming off of that first week and our first session. So I'm really excited about that. And so for those of you who didn't jump in and catch this round of groups, I have a program that runs year round. So if you're looking for additional support, if you're new to fertility awareness, or if you've been charting for a while and you just need that additional support, if you're trying to conceive and you're really wanting to make some improvements in your parameters of your cycle, those are all things that I address in all of my programs. So just head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme for more information. And you can always set up a free 15-minute consult if you have questions about the programs. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. And before we jump into today's show, I just want to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Innova Fertility.
This is Dr. Margie Dixon, CEO and founder of Innova Fertility and Reproductive Health in Toronto. As a veteran reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist, I'm a huge proponent of women getting educated on their fertility. It's true that knowledge is power, ladies. In 2016, I created Innova with the goal to be the leader in innovation, education, and communication for high-quality and humanized fertility and reproductive care, and I'm proud that we have the first next-generation IVF lab in Canada. We built our lab to support our mission to bring the latest technology, science, and evidence-based medicine to fertility treatment. With the science and tech in place, our highly experienced team is focused on humanizing the all-too-often clinical approach out there. It's been a year, and I'm thrilled Innova is celebrating her first birthday this month. We have helped so many of our patients begin beautiful new love stories in their families this year, and I couldn't be more proud. If you're in the Toronto area and are interested in learning more about IVF from our medical team, we welcome you to sign up for IVF 101 education sessions at our center. Please visit our website at Innova, that's ANOVA, fertility.com, under our services tab to register. For those of you who may be out of province or out of country, we may also be able to help. Email info@anovafertility.com to request a medical consultation by Skype. Remember, the first step in success is understanding your specific fertility situation. The next is finding a qualified fertility specialist team you're comfortable with, whether that is Anova, and I hope it is, or at another qualified center. I sincerely wish you every success in creating your next love story. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon. For more information about Dr. Dixon, if you haven't had a chance to listen to episode number 109, definitely check it out. The title of the episode is The Reality of Aging and Fertility, IVF and Assisted Reproductive Technology, and the Future of Fertility Treatments. A truly eye-opening episode. Without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. And today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Heli Kurjanen, to the show. I did not pronounce her last name correctly, so I'll give her the opportunity to pronounce it right with the right accent. But I just want to thank you so much, Heli, for coming on the show. So welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, thank you so much for being here. So would you please share your name correctly with the right accent so that listeners, and you're from, which country are you from?
Finland.
Finland. Yes. That's why I can't pronounce the name properly.
Yeah. So I'm Heli Kurjanen.
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't give it justice. And and you are the founder of Lunette. And as I was saying in our pre-chat, I have a lot of women who are listening to the podcast who have used Lunette. And I posed a question to my private Facebook group. I was letting them know that I was going to do our interview, and I wanted to put some questions out there. So there's a lot of women who love Lunette, who love menstrual cups, and I know a lot of my listeners use them or have discovered them after listening to the podcast. And so to get us started today, I would love to hear about how Lunette came about and what inspired you to jump into this world of menstrual cups.
Oh, it started like 12 years ago. I used cloth diapers with my children, and I had a company where I made those. And through that channel, I learned about reusable menstrual products. And I saw menstrual cups that were, the first reaction was like, oh my God, that is so disgusting. But I still wanted to read more, and I actually ordered a cup through an online store. I started to use that. I was kind of happy. I really loved the idea, and I loved the concept of it. But I wasn't really happy of the usage of that cup. And basically, I was complaining to my husband that this could be so awesome if it would be a little bit different. And he has been working with starting up companies, and he was like, "Oh my God, start making your own and don't complain anything." To me. And yeah, that happened. Everything happened very easily. Like things clicked, and soon I was a company owner and manufacturing menstrual cups.
So this wasn't something that you ever thought that you would be involved with then?
No, never.
Oh, that's kind of awesome. I love it that you were unhappy with what was there and you were complaining about it. And then your husband was just like, well, why don't you just make one? And you did.
Yeah, that was kind of jump into unknown, but I have been enjoying the ride so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would love for you to share what it was in particular about the cups that were available that was not to your satisfaction.
In general, the design wasn't really that comfortable to me, and I was thinking the cup that I was using at the time was a little bit too long for me. It also had like rigid stem that was difficult to cut, and it wasn't that easy to clean because it had a lot of writing inside of the cup. So I was thinking that these can't be issues. I can't be the only one who is having these issues, and that was the reason why I started to plan the perfect menstrual cup.
So I have actually not used Lunette specifically, which might change after our conversation today.
Yeah.
I've only used the Diva cup, and then before the Diva cup, I used the Keeper.
Yeah.
And so I can relate to that. I feel like in some of the cups that I've used, there is some writing, and so you do have to kind of wash around that. It's always a little bit awkward to figure out how to fit them. So for every woman who has ever switched to a menstrual cup, it's always a bit of a onboarding process to figure out how the heck to use this thing. So I guess maybe you could just share about how you used your own experiences to inspire the design of Lunette and how Lunette then is a bit different to some of the other cups that are available, because there's quite a few of them on the market now.
Yeah. So the biggest difference was the size. Like basically our cups holds around the same size than all of the other cups too, but our cup is a little bit shorter than the cups that were on the market at that time. Things have changed a lot because there are so much more products available nowadays. But back in the day, there was only a couple of cups. So the cup is shorter. The stem we have is flat and it's flexible. It's really easy to use if you need the stem, but if you don't, it's super easy to trim. The cup doesn't have any writings on the inside of the cup, and on the outside, the logo and the Made in Finland sign is kind of, it's not that pronounced. So it's in general, it's more easier to clean. And the air holes are quite big, so they are also easy to clean. So those are the biggest things that are different. And nowadays we have colors. When we started, we had only the clear one, but now we have different colors, and those are also kind of unique.
Well, and in terms of, because what I see is I see a trend of women moving away from some of the traditional menstrual products for a variety of reasons. And so maybe you could share why women are starting to want to use the menstrual cup. What are some of the different reasons that you find women switch to it?
I think when we started, the biggest thing was definitely the environmental issues, that women thought that it's because it's reusable, it saves environment, that's good for you. But during these years, the more we teach women, they realize that these cups are more comfortable to use. They don't have any toxins, so they are safer to use. And because they are reusable, they also save money. So that's kind of a big thing too. But I think that on a global perspective, the toxins and the health issues are arising more and more.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's such an important point. And that's one of the real draws that there was for me to switch to reusable menstrual products. And you mentioned that you use cloth diapers with your children. And It's really interesting how these things relate to each other, because after a decade and plus more of using menstrual cups myself, then when I had my children, I naturally gravitated to using cloth diapers because I couldn't get my head around that image of a landfill full of products.
Yeah, I think it's easier kind of for me. I didn't even thought that my periods could be an issue, but when I was using diapers, the first ones, the more traditional disposable diapers, it kind of shocked me because they are so big and you can actually see how much waste you are creating. Mm-hmm. And cloth diapers are a really good thing also.
Yes. Well, and because the one diaper, you can use it for years and you can use it between multiple children. And you see very quickly with the diapers, just like you said, because they're bigger, how much you use. And so as a menstruating woman, if you think about how many periods you have each year, and then if you think about how many menstrual products you use and where they go and what happens to them, I know that that's not the reason why every woman uses them, but that's a big part of it for a lot of women.
Yeah. And I think it's good to realize that you can make a huge difference with this kind of type of products.
Well, and I remember one of the other big draws for me. So I started using menstrual cups when I was in university, and I remember going to this talk. And in this talk, these young women, so they were university ages as well, and they were just sharing their passion about natural menstrual products and those types of things. But they were educating about the toxins. So what you mentioned, the toxins and all the different chemicals that are in menstrual products that go into our vaginas. Like, it doesn't make sense that they would have all these toxins and chemicals. But beyond that, there was a discussion about what your menstruation, what your period blood is actually made of.
Mm.
And it turns out it's not clear blue liquid.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about then how menstrual cups are more effective in capturing what it is that we actually have when we're on our periods.
Yes, cups are, they just collect the fluid. They don't absorb anything like tampons do, so they don't dry. So they are much more comfortable and they are much more healthier to you. And I think that for lots of women, starting to use a menstrual cup has changed their views to their period blood, because it's not something that is really disgusting or anything. It's basically just blood. Of course, it has tissues on it, but it's not dirty, it's not brown, it doesn't smell like it does in a bath, for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, and how did you find your own discovery of menstrual cups, obviously leading then to this amazing company that you've created, but how did you find that experience was for you personally to, did it transform the way you looked at your menstruation, or were you always kind of open in that respect, or did it actually make a shift for you?
I was quite open with my periods, but I didn't really like them, but I basically didn't hate them either. But when I started to use a cup and I saw the blood for the first time as a blood, and I kind of saw that very beautiful. So, and it also made me a little bit more in tune with my body, and I felt like I'm a little bit more woman than I was before. Kind of, I felt that it's a natural way that my body does, and I think that was empowering.
Mm-hmm. I feel that so many women who have, because on one hand, for a woman who's listening who maybe has never tried a menstrual cups or maybe is grossed out by the idea, I know you mentioned that at the beginning, is kind of like, this is kind of gross,
Yeah.
the thought of it. But for women who are listening in that, if they've never used it before, I would imagine that they might be thinking, how could changing your menstrual product make such a big difference in the way that you look at your periods? And I suppose it's hard to put it into words. I mean, it's hard to share how that process can change the way that you look at your own body and it change your relationship to your menstruation.
Yeah, it's actually really difficult, but we are getting constantly so many feedbacks from women all over the world that they are like, they used to hate their periods, but they now they actually love them. It can change a lot more than you can think of.
Well, I feel like there's a couple different ways that it can change it. One of them is that because of the way that menstrual cups are designed, you have to touch your body. So
Yeah.
you actually have to touch your vagina. You have to put your fingers inside of your vagina. And it really gives you an education. One of the things I'm trying to remember who, actually, I was recently talking to some friends of mine, and we were talking about just the experience of trying a menstrual cup for the first time, and or the experience of using a diaphragm. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, when I first got my menstrual cup, my first impression was, oh my gosh, this is so big. Where is this supposed to go? And so it really gives you an education then around your vagina. Like, it really, and I'm not explaining it very well, but when you see it and then you have to manipulate it and you have to use it and you have to figure out how to put it in, how to situate it so that it's comfortable, and then the process, somehow it does connect you more to your body.
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so for the listeners who are listening then, and now we're talking about kind of the logistics of putting it in, what do you find is the most challenging aspect of adjusting to menstrual cups for the women that have, bought the Lunette cup and the women who contact you? What do you find are some of the biggest challenges for adjusting to this new menstrual blood catcher?
The biggest thing is probably the reason you actually mentioned just recently, that you need to touch yourself. There are lots of women who haven't been using, they might not been using anything internal, and if they use tampons, they use tampons with applicators, so they don't really need to touch themselves at all. So in the beginning, that might be a little bit difficult, like understand how you fold it, how you insert it, and to make sure that the cup is opened, because if it's not opened, it might leak. But when it's opened correctly and it stays there, it just collects the blood, and it's super easy to use. But there is a learning curve, definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and during that learning curve, you're kind of figuring out how to use it in a way that feels comfortable. And I know one of the things that you mentioned is the comfort. And so for me, that was another really big draw for menstrual cups in general, because once you get the hang of inserting it, once you get the hang of where it's supposed to go, how it's supposed to sit, then you don't feel it. So the use of it is comfortable. But then there's another aspect of it, because it's not absorbent, because it's not like a smushed up cotton ball.
Yeah.
When you're inserting it, it doesn't dry your tissues.
Yeah.
So maybe you could share just a little bit about that aspect in comparison to tampons or something like that.
Yeah, so menstrual cups, our cups are made from medical grade silicone. So it's really safe material. It doesn't absorb anything, so it doesn't dry. And tampons, on the other hand, they are made from bleach, cotton. They contain rayon most of the time, and they leave fibers behind. So I think all women who have used tampons, they know what it feels like to take out tampon when you don't really have much flow anymore. It doesn't feel nice.
No, it feels super dry and scratchy and uncomfortable.
Yeah. So with the cup, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the natural vagina's natural ability to clean itself. It just stays there. It doesn't change anything. So that's the reason why it's more comfortable too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and along that note, it also doesn't leave anything behind. And
Yeah.
so one of the kind of clear memories that I have when I was learning about the differences between these different menstrual products and some of the potential harmful impacts of tampons is that if you were to actually what they did was they put a tampon in a glass of water to kind of show how absorbent it is and how much it is designed to absorb. But we all know that. Oh, I shouldn't say that, but my experience, and you can share, Heli, your experience of using tampons, even though they could technically absorb like half a cup of water, they don't it would be leaking before that, right? Like you wouldn't actually get that maximum absorbency out of it just because of the way that it works. But with that example, they put the tampon in a glass of water. So if you want to do this, it'd be interesting. You leave it in there for a while and swish it around and then take it out. And then what's in the water? A ton of little fibers.
Yeah. And imagine leaving those into your vagina, like when when you have all of the vaginal walls are dry because the tampons have dried them, and then you have the fibers. It's not healthy.
Yeah. So when you think about, and if you were to put a tampon in your mouth, kind of same idea. It gives you that.
Yeah.
So there's so many different reasons why I think women are switching to menstrual cups. And so from that kind of overall, like bigger picture perspective, do you find that there is more of a trend for women to be looking for alternatives, or a trend to be moving towards more natural, healthier options?
Yeah, there definitely is a huge growing trend. Yeah. Globally, it's not just in the States where but it's like happening globally. Women are talking so much more. Periods are becoming to be a topic that it's okay to talk about. When we started, nobody wanted to talk about their periods.
Yeah, it was so interesting how periods have gotten a lot of good PR in the last couple of years. They're definitely becoming more of a topic of discussion. And I think one of the other draws around menstrual cups in general is that because of the way that they are designed, they feel like a product that is designed for women by women. So if a woman was to come up with a solution to her menstrual cycle and to how to manage her period, this is a solution that she would come up with, as opposed to, tampons and pads have their place, of course, but I find it to be such a more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I know.
And who would have thought that we would be talking about enjoying our periods?
Yeah. This is how world changes.
Yes, exactly. Well, and so one of the questions that I had from one of my listeners that she wanted me to ask you about is around the age of when women can start using menstrual cups. So maybe you could share your experience. Are menstrual cups for every woman? Are they for teenagers at a young age? And if so, how do you support then a younger a woman kind of using it for the first time, especially if she's a younger teenager, say 13, 14, 15?
Yeah, we have users from, I think the youngest one that has emailed us was 11. So there is a huge range of young girls, women who are using the cup. And basically when these younger girls, they start to use the cup, we recommend the smaller one because it's softer, so it's a little bit, and it's also smaller, and it's a little bit easier to put in. They might have problems like inserting it because their vaginal muscles are most of the time really tight, and they might have hymen. So it's inserting the cup might be a little bit more difficult than with adult women who have had children, for example. But they can use it, and I think the biggest thing is that they just need to be comfortable, like with the thought of using a cup, internal cup. Mm-hmm. We have awesome customer service, so if somebody wants to try our cup and does have any questions, just email us. We have awesome people who are working with the customer service.
Well, and do you think that, so when I think about this whole topic of having young teenage girls using something that they have to insert into their vagina, I feel that there is this kind of like a taboo around it for young women who maybe are not sexually active yet. Mm. And so did you want to speak a little bit to that and how that idea could play into whether or not people think that menstrual cups would be suitable for younger women?
They are suitable, but because it's internal, there might be this kind of thoughts that it's for like the whole virginity issue. We don't think that cups, because they are internal, they might break the hymen, but we don't think that the hymen is a sign of virginity. It's that, like, you haven't had sex, whatever type of sex, but sex anyways, then you are virgin. This is a little bit difficult. It's so complex. There are so many things that needs to be taken into account, but there are young girls who have been using the cup. They are super happy with it, and they don't want to use anything else. And we think that they have any right to use whatever product they want. So we don't really push this to anyone. We don't say that you need to use only cups. We know that there are lots of women who want to use pads, for example, or they want to use tampons. We just think that our cup is the best one.
Of course. Well, and you brought up such an important point, which is that whole societal construct of virginity. Yeah. Because that's what it is. For a man, there's no concept of a physical organ or a physical indicator, I guess you could say, of virginity. You have sex and then you look the same as you did before, but there's this concept that, a woman has a hymen before, and then when she has sex, it breaks, and that's this physical marker of virginity. And then the question,
that's even true.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the hymen is a really interesting thing to talk about, but interesting that it would be this thing for people to think, well, is she still a virgin if she uses the cup?
Yeah, we started to sell in, I think it was Iran, many years ago. And in those instructions, we say, because the company who imported them, they said that they can't sell them unless we say that these are for married women only.
Wow.
And that's kind of sad. But yeah, there are these cultural issues that just happen.
So that's an actual thing. So you, in order to have your product sold in certain countries, you have to put that on there.
Yeah.
Well, that's very enlightening. How do you feel about that?
I don't like it, but I understand that they think differently about this. So it's kind of, we are trying to change the world, but it takes time.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that is quite a literal nod to the conversation that we were just having around it, because then there are definitely those out there that would look at this as something that could challenge whether or not a person is considered to be, whether or not a woman specifically is considered to be a virgin.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like that ties itself into what we were talking about initially, which is that when you use a menstrual cup, it forces you to touch your body and get acquainted with your body in a way that otherwise you wouldn't. And so there is still this cultural taboo around our bodies that prevents us from touching them, from exploring, from understanding.
Yeah.
Even the most basic level.
Yeah, that's something that we constantly recommend people when we are at the expos, that please touch yourself, feel yourself. It's super important to know what is happening in your own body.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, because I feel like it's hard to pinpoint why changing to something like a menstrual cup can make such a big difference in terms of a woman's understanding of her body, but just even how challenging it is to talk about some of these different topics and the way that different cultures look at something like a menstrual cup that has to be inserted with your fingers. It simultaneously speaks to how important it is to have these types of conversations.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the questions as well that came up in my Facebook group was around the sizing. So are there different sizes for the Lunette cups?
Yeah, we have 2 different sizes. So we recommend, unlike some other menstrual cup brands, during these years, we have learned that the most determining factor is the amount of flow. So we recommend the smaller one for lighter periods and the bigger one for heavier.
Okay. And I know that other brands of menstrual cups will do sizing around, it's interesting, around a woman's age and or whether or not she's had children before.
Yeah. So we have learned that it's not true. We used to start with that too, but we have lots of women who have had many children, but they have light periods and they prefer the size 1 because it's smaller and it's more comfortable to use.
Okay. Well, I remember there was this kind of running joke around a friend of mine, and this was years ago. So this was back in my university days, but we were discovering all these different things and we were talking about the menstrual cup. And when you would read some of the packaging, it would say, use, size 1 if you haven't had children, and if you're under age 30, and then use size number 2 if you're over 30 or if you've had children. And so I remember when my friends would always say, what happens when you turn 30? What, is my vagina going to get bigger?
Yeah, overnight they grow.
So I thought that's really interesting. And it's interesting then that, so you do the sizing based on the amount, which is really interesting. So, but the size 2 is obviously bigger. Is it wider or is it longer, or what are the differences in size?
Yeah, it's a little bit wider and it's a little bit longer. Okay. And it's also made from a little bit stiffer silicone. So it's not as soft as the size 1.
Okay. And so in terms of the design, I think it's harder as a woman to conceptualize that we would all have different size vaginas. I think it's easier to conceptualize that men have different sizes of penises.
Yeah.
Because they're hanging out there. So it's obvious that some men are going to have wider, longer, or shorter, whatever. But for women, then I can't look inside all of our vaginas, but I would imagine that our vaginas are different lengths, potentially different widths. So how do you find that the Lunette cup accommodates for the different sizes? Is it enough? Is every woman going to feel comfortable with either the smaller or the bigger? Or are there some women who maybe have a shorter, like there's maybe their cervix is in a different location, or like, I think you know what I'm asking here.
Yeah. So we recommend the size 1, which is the smaller one for those women who have a low cervix, because then it fits a little bit nicer. But basically, based on the feedback that we have had, like during these 11 years of business, all women can use the cup, like either of the sizes. The other one is just might be a little bit more comfortable to use, but although the vaginas are all different, they are still quite alike, so to say.
Aw, it's comforting in a way. And so another question then for cup users is one of leakage. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, so I've used a cup for a number of years. There's times when it'll leak a little. There's times when it won't. So maybe you could share around that what your direction is, or maybe some of the reasons that your users may experience leakage.
Yeah, basically the cup might leak if it's not in the right place or if it's not open. Otherwise, it won't leak. So it needs to be below the cervix so it collects the flow. And it needs to be properly opened. And to make sure that the cup is open, you can either move it a little bit up and down or twist it from the bottom. So it kind of, you can feel with your finger that it's actually opened properly. And and there, of course, there might be leakage with heavy periods and if you just overflow, but that's not normal. Like normally women don't bleed as much as they think they do.
Well, that's a really interesting point. And yeah, so I think I'm going to hang out there for a minute, because I think that is, there's a lot of validity to that. I think that when you're using a menstrual product that absorbs, it kind of distorts your understanding of how much bleeding you might be having.
Yeah.
And so then when you use a menstrual cup, it becomes quite clear how much blood there is. And yes, I would imagine that a lot of women are surprised to find that there is just not as much as they thought there was.
Yeah. I was thinking also that I have heavy periods when I started to use the cup, and I was like so surprised that there was only this small drop of blood when I went to empty it. But yeah, it's kind of the one thing that is really good with the cups is that you can actually measure how much you flow. There are women who are having really heavy periods and they don't really understand that they are actually so heavy that they are anemic and they would need to eat more greens or have iron supplements, and period blood in general can tell you more things than you could imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's so interesting then, because when you have the cup, I think that's one of the really powerful shifts that can happen from thinking that it's just this gross, dirty thing to really starting to look at it, to see what color it is, to see how liquid it is. Sometimes it might be a little more on the liquid side or more on the goopy side, or depending.
Yeah.
And depending on the type of practitioner that a woman works with, if she's concerned, for example, in traditional Chinese medicine, they'll tell you a whole lot of information about what the color, the consistency, the amount of blood means and what it indicates about your health. And so it gives women this unique opportunity to really understand that their period doesn't happen in isolation, and that it really happens within the context of their overall health, and it tells them a lot about what's happening in their bodies.
Yeah, that is so true.
So I know we're on a podcast, so obviously we don't have the benefit of video, but I would love for you to explain how to insert the cup.
That's a little bit difficult because we don't have the video. I normally start that I have, like at the expose, I have the cup in my hand and I start to explain that you fold it in two and then you fold it again and then you just insert it with the rim first inside to the vagina, let it open. You can hear sometimes this kind of plop sound when it opens. Twist from the bottom so it opens correctly and it just stays there. By the vaginal walls, it has a small suction that keeps it in place, and it just collects the blood. And just when you take it out, pinch from the bottom so the suction releases, and rock it out, empty it, wash it, and use it again.
Mm-hmm. Well, you did great. That was a really great description. I completely could visualize that. Well, because it comes and it's this cup. So it's kind of like, how do I get it in there? But yes, fold it in half and then half again. And then you kind of hear that. That was a really bad. I tried. Sorry, guys. And how do you know? So how is it supposed to feel? And how do you know if you have it in right?
So when it's right, you can't feel it at all. And the only thing that you might feel is the stem. And if you can't feel the stem, it's too long for you and you should trim it.
Mm-hmm. That is such an important point for women who are using it for the first time, because I think until you get the hang of how to insert it and where it's supposed to sit, then you may think mistakenly that it's just uncomfortable to wear if you haven't quite got it high enough, for example.
Yeah. And in the beginning, when I started to use my cup for the first time, I kind of felt it constantly because I was thinking it so much that I think I was kind of pushing my pelvic floor and like thinking about it constantly. But yeah, when it's in the right place, you can't feel it. It's soft, it moves when you move, and it just stays there.
Well, and I think one of the questions that women have a lot when they're considering using this is, how do I change this thing in public? Like, what if I'm not at home and I'm at work and I have to use a bathroom stall? How do I do that?
Normally, lots of women have so light and like light to normal flow. It's enough if you empty it in the morning and in the evening. And if you have heavier periods, then you probably need to empty it during the day. And for public toilets, we have developed cup wipes that are individually packed disinfecting wipes. So you don't need to have water available. You just use the wipes to clean it up and then put it back in. But you can also use toilet paper. Mm-hmm. Just empty the cup, clean it with toilet paper, and wash it properly when you are at home or somewhere where you have the sink nearby. So you don't need to walk with a cup to the public sink, like shared sink. So that's not the thing that we recommend.
Well, because I feel like that's one of the questions that I see and hear most often, which is like, how do I do this in public? And so I know some women would even go as far as to bring a little water bottle or something and rinse it out. But I typically just dump it, and if I'm in a public place and I need to change or something like that, just like dump it, kind of tidy it up a little bit, and then reinsert it. And then when I go home, make sure to do the full thorough cleaning. But it's really not a big deal.
Yeah, that's what I do too. And in general, it's the most important thing to remember is that you need to have your hands clean when you touch the cup, because your hands will be the one that bring bacteria to the cup, not the blood itself.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because then the only thing that's really different in my bathroom routine is then I wash my hands before I go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And everything else is pretty much the same, and it's not a big deal. Awesome. Well, is there anything that, as we kind of draw to a close of our interview today, is there anything that comes to mind that you really want to share with the listeners, whether it's about your own experience, moving into this realm, or about menstrual cups, or any of the topics that we talked about today?
I don't think that there is anything special. I just wanted to let everyone know that if you have any questions about the cup, just email us and we will be happy to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I'll ask a couple questions then to wrap up the show. After everything we've talked about today, what would you want our listeners to take from our conversation?
Oh my God. The biggest takeaway is that touch yourself, get to know your body, and don't be afraid of trying a menstrual cup.
Awesome. Well, Heli, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really a treat to be able to chat with you and to pick your brain and find out more about the Lunette cup and the company and how it came to be. And also just how it can transform a woman's relationship with her body and with her period. So I just want to thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. It was my pleasure.
And so for the listeners then, if they want to find more about you or if they want to learn more about Lunette, where can they go to get in touch?
Lunette.com.
All right. Well, that's easy to remember. And I will also link that in the show notes. So thank you so much for being here.
And we are also on social media at Lunette Cup.
Okay. Well, yes, we will link to all of those in the show notes page. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to share it with a friend. Menstrual cups are a hot topic, so if there's anyone in your life that's like on the verge thinking about whether or not they should make the switch, this might be a great episode to share with them. Just head over to fertilityfriday.com/156, and that's where you'll find the show notes page. And of course, if you're listening in iTunes, I think you can just click on share, and then you can do it that way. I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Heli. It was such a treat to be able to talk to the founder of Lunette and really find out what inspired her to create this incredible product and to jump in and start her own company and distribute it worldwide. And so that was a lot of fun. And as a little update, actually, this interview was recorded a while ago. We recorded it quite some time ago. And after we recorded our interview, Heli actually sent me a sample Lunette cup. And so for several cycles, I've actually been using the Lunette cup, and I just wanted to share a little bit about what my experience has been with it. For those of you who've been listening to the show for a while, you'll know that I've actually used menstrual cups quite extensively for quite a long time. I was just saying to a friend yesterday that I think I got my first cup. So back then, there wasn't all these fancy options. I don't think Lunette existed back then, but I think it was around like in the year 2000 or 2001. And my first menstrual cup was actually a keeper. For those of you who've never heard of that, you can Google it. I'm sure that they still make it. But the keeper was a natural gum rubber cup. And so the Diva cup came on the scene after the keeper. And of course, what was interesting about the Diva cup was that it was silicone based instead of the natural gum rubber, because I think from my understanding, there were some women who reacted to it. At some point, I switched from the keeper to the Diva cup. And then at some point, I switched from like size A or size 1 or whatever it was to size 2. So over the years, I've used a few cups, but I haven't used that many different brands. And so basically, my experience with the Lunette cup has been very positive. And the main differences that I found in using the Lunette cup over the Diva cup is that the Lunette cup, it has more of a stiff structure. So it feels more structurally sound. I don't know if that's really how to describe it, but my experience has been that the Lunette cup, it is firmer. And so for me, that's a good thing. It's a positive thing for me because it feels more secure when I put it in. And one of the challenges, and I have a blog post about menstrual cups that I'll link to in this podcast episode. I talk about some of the challenges that I've had with menstrual cups. So overall, I'm really happy with menstrual cups. I've used them for a really long time, but there have been a couple challenges. One of them is leaking. And so I've mentioned on the show before that I tend towards like a heavier cycle, somewhere that ranges between like normal and heavy, depending on what's happening over the years. My cycles were on the heavier end. And that was one of the reasons why I was attracted to menstrual cups, because they held a lot more and I was able to use them for a lot longer than a lot of the different brands of tampons. But with that being said, I typically do wear a cup in conjunction with like a Luna pad or some sort of reusable panty liner. I usually use like a Luna panty liner or something like that. And so anyways, my experience with the Lunette cup was that it did feel more comfortable. It did fit well, but I still did have some leaking. Not necessarily more or less than I did with the Diva cup, but I still did have some leaking. So inadvertently enough, I'm still on the hunt for a cup that has no leakage. I don't know if that's possible in my case. I would like to have that experience. That would be great. But for what it's worth, it only leaks on the heavier days. So it's just something over the years that it's to be expected. And I just wear a little panty liner and that seems to solve it for me. So that is my TMI Friday for you all, sharing my experience with the Lunette cup. But overall, I really, really like it. I really feel like the design, I'm not sure just in the materials that are used, but the feel is quite different. And I did find that it was, like I said, more structurally sound. And so I would love to hear what your experience has been like. So if you use tampons, if you use pads, if you use reusable pads, if you use menstrual cups, I would love to hear more about it. And so I'm going to start a thread in my private Facebook community for the Fertility Friday listeners. And so if you're not in there already, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/community. And then you can jump in and join us in there because, I want to hear what your experience has been like. And in particular, if you've used menstrual cups, I want to know, have you actually tried Lunette before? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Have you tried the Diva cup? There's a number of different brands. So if you've tried a bunch of different brands, which ones have you tried? And, which one was your favorite? Which one did you like the least? Why? And which one would you recommend? I would love to just hear more about it because ultimately there's just so many different brands now. And so for anyone listening who's trying to decide whether or not they should try a cup, which cup they should try, how it works, I feel like this is a great opportunity for us to share, especially for those of you who have experience using them and who've tried different kinds, for you to share your expertise and your knowledge with the rest of us so that we can make decisions about what to try and what not to try. Yes, please join me in there, fertilityfriday.com/community. I just want to thank you all for listening and for supporting the show. I really appreciate all of you for being part of the Fertility Friday community. And as you know, one of my dreams is that in our lifetime, more women learn the connection between their fertility and their health. Ultimately, the basis and the foundation of this podcast is to really share with you that understanding, just the basic understanding of how your menstrual cycle works, just the basic knowledge that you're not fertile every single day of your cycle and that there's a defined period of fertility in your cycle that you can learn to interpret, understand, and track. And also that your menstrual cycle reflects back to you the state of your overall health. And I really believe that the world would be a different place if all women knew that. And if it was just something that was taught, if it was standard. My experience just interviewing well over 130 or 40 guests over the course of this past 2.5 years has just shown me that most of us don't know. And it's irrelevant whether or not you're speaking to a woman just, here and there, just out in the world, or whether you're speaking to a medical practitioner or someone who's an actually trained practitioner. Most women don't have that basic understanding of how their fertility works, even if they find themselves in the health field. And it's surprising in many ways, but it's not surprising in others because there's this information it's missing from the discussion. So I really appreciate you for being part of the community and for helping me spread the word. All of you out there sharing the podcast with your friends and, spreading the word about fertility awareness, that's truly where the difference is going to be made. And this is how women are going to learn and be acquainted with this knowledge. It's really by all of us talking about it to all of our friends, and gradually the knowledge and the understanding will get out there. So thank you so much for listening. If you have recently discovered fertility awareness and you're wanting to make the transition from hormonal birth control to a non-hormonal method that you can actually rely on and count on, and you're wanting some support to gain that confidence to use fertility awareness effectively and confidently, make sure to check out my Work With Me page. I have a number of programs that I offer to support you in that transition phase. So that's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. And if you have questions about the programs that I offer, make sure to set up a free 15-minute consultation so that we can talk about which program would be the best fit for you. So thanks again, and until next time, be well and happy charting.